Good evening. I'm Jake Fangman. Tonight I'm going to be talking about my research project, which was the Revolutionary War and motivations on the frontier. I began by talking about some of the things in the couple years leading up to the war that built the foundation for the climate between the settlers and the Indians. Some of those things were King George III's proclamation of 1763 and the Quebec Act of 1764. What these had done was it was the British' attempt to keep the settlers from moving west to the Allegheny Mountains, because the westward movement of the settlers was pushing the Indian tribes, namely the Lenape or the Delaware, the Shawnee, and the Iroquois, out of their traditional lands and consolidating them in the Ohio River Valley. This was a major issue for the Indian tribes because they were now reliant on the goods that they received through fur trading. And with the settlers cultivating their historic hunting lands and all of the tribes being consolidated in a smaller location, the fur trading wasn't as productive for them. This all kind of came to a head shortly before the Revolutionary War in Lord Dunmore's War. There's a lot of things that went into Lord Dunmore's War, but mainly what I was focusing on was the effect on the Native Americans, specifically the Shawnee, because that's who was fighting the Virginians. Lord Dunmore's War ended with the Battle of Point Pleasant in present-day West Virginia and Ohio, right on the Ohio River. Lord Dunmore had dispatched a group of Virginia militiamen to take care of the Shawnee and try to take some land north of the Ohio River, which is currently the border. And the Shawnee chief decided to strike first and attacked the militiamen's camp, and which should have been a sounding victory for the Shawnee, ended up being a defeat for them because the Virginians were so bent on righting some past wrongs and continuing the cycle of retaliation that they regrouped and crossed the Ohio River and took the fight to the Shawnee, which forced the Shawnee into a humiliating treaty with the Virginians and kind of built, the foundation for the climate that would continue into the Revolutionary War in the next couple of years. Walter Dunn wrote a book that I read where he attributed 4 factors to the Indians' decision on whether or not they were going to ally with the British or remain neutral, as the Americans were requesting in the Revolutionary War. So those 4 things were they needed new blood for their clans due to the epidemics of smallpox and other diseases that had limited the number of marriage age people in the clans. So the marriage prospects weren't there for the young people to marry outside of the clan bloodline and have children. Horses had become important to the Native Americans at this time, and the only way for them to get them was through raids. Obviously, land was a major issue for them, and the fur trade. And what Dunn found was that the first 3 of those favored the British. The new bloodline for their clans and the horses, they were getting those through raids on the settlers. And if they sided with the Americans, they'd have to stop that. And the land, the British had already proven through the Proclamation of 1763 and the Quebec Act of 1764 that they were willing to try to prevent westward settlement and protect the Native Americans' land. The settlers, on the other hand, they weren't interested in fighting the British in the war in the East. The ones that did enlist were either tricked into it or drafted or filling in for somebody that was drafted, or they were apprentices or servants that were looking for a better life. They were more interested in protecting their homes and farming, because they were making more money farming than they would have fighting for the Continental Army. So these all of these motivations that the settlers and the Indians had revolved around racial animosity and a cycle of retaliation. There's a lot of, we're retaliating for you killing this person, and then we're retaliating for you killing that person. And you can see in the case study that I looked at Fort Lawrence that this resulted in just extremely bloody and violent battles, which brought me to the conclusion that the war, during the Revolutionary War on the frontier, was a much different war, fought very differently for very different reasons than the war in the East, fought against the British regulars for freedom and liberty.